So in the last section we talked about radical expressions. Now let's talk about simplifying radical expressions. And when we simplify these, our goal is that we want the powers under the radical to be smaller than the index, and we don't want fractions under the radical. To illustrate this, let's look at a couple of examples. And so let's take this fraction here, and first of all note that we've got an x to the 7th over an x to the 1st, and so let's rewrite that as x to the 6th, and then a y to the 12th, and then a 125, well, that's the same as 5 cubed. And why I write it like that you'll see here in a bit, but let's write it like this, all raised to the 1/4 power. Okay. And so now what I'd like to be able to do is take this 1/4 power and distribute it among things so that things are going to cancel nicely. Well, they're not really going to cancel with this 5 cubed in the denominator, so let's do a little trick here. Let's write this as 5 over 5 to the 4th power. Okay. And now x to the 6th, let's write this as x to the 4th times x squared. And then write this y to the 12th as well. Let's just leave it as y to the 12th. Okay, 1/4. And so what I'm trying to do here is write everything as something raised to a power, so that that power is either going to be able to cancel with the 1/4 or that power is less than 4. Okay? And so now when I distribute, like I distribute the 1/4 down here, I'm going to get just 5 to the 1st power. Okay? Now that's, if I distribute the 1/4 to this 5 here, nothing's really going to happen. So let's just leave the 5, that 5 over here. I distribute the 1/4 to this 4th there in that exponent, and I'm going to get an x to the 1st power. I distribute it to the 2 there in the x squared, and nothing's really going to happen. So let's just leave that there. And then distribute the 1/4 to the y to the 12th, and I'm going to get a y cubed. Okay. Now the 5 and the x squared, those were still underneath the 1/4 power. And so there's nothing really more that we can do with that. So now let's just rewrite things, clean it up a little bit. We've got an xy cubed over 5 to the 1st power, 5x squared, and then we'll take the 4th root of that. So there we have our simplified radical expression. The powers underneath the radical are all less than 4. There's no fractions underneath the radical. That's exactly what we want. Now let's look at another example. And again, let's try to rewrite things so that we've got everything raised to a power that's either less than 5 or divisible by 5. And so let's start off by just simplifying things as much as we can here. For instance, we've got an x to the 11th over x squared, so we've got an x to the 9th, and then a y cubed. Well, the 3, that's less than 5, and so that's not a big deal. And then we've got a 3 over 9, and so let's rewrite that as just 1 over 3, and then this is all raised to the 1/5 power. Okay. Now the y cubed, that's okay, that 3 is less than 5, no big deal. The x to the 9th, well, let's rewrite that as like x to the 5th times x to the 4th power, y cubed. Now, I don't like having that 3 in the denominator, and so let's do this. Let's rewrite this as 3 to the 5th power, but then I'm going to put a 3 to the 4th power in the numerator. Okay, completely equivalent to what I started with, it just looks different. And so now let's distribute that 1/5 power across as much as we can, and simplify as much as we can. So the 1/5, take that times the 5 and this power in the denominator, so we're going to get a 1 over 3 to the 1st power, Okay. Take the 1/5 to the 4 in this exponent, nothing's really going to happen, so let's just kind of write that off to the side there. 1/5, take it times this 5 in that exponent, so we're going to get an x to the first power. 1/5 times that power, again nothing's really going to happen, so let's just write this as x to the fourth. 1/5 times this exponent, again nothing's really going to happen, that's y cubed. And so this is all still to the 1/5 power. And so now let's just clean this up a little bit. We're going to get an x over 3, and then 3 to the 4th power, well that's 81, x to the 4th, y cubed, and then that is underneath the 5th power. And so there we go. That's what we want. All the powers underneath the radical are less than 5 and no fractions. We're simplified.